Last week, the Prime Minister of New Zealand declared that the Easter Bunny was an essential service provider, and as such was permitted to carry out his responsibility on Easter morning. It was a warm and welcome moment of reprieve. Reminds us that this difficult time is being shared by people all over the world. It also served as a reminder that imagination is a powerful tool on our side to defeat the darkness and restore us to hope. I want to share with you an imaginative story that arose out of the life of Charleswood United Church, a story for children and congregation, a story that speaks of another essential service provider. That is the Grinch, more familiar to us at Christmas. But have you ever imagined what the Grinch's first Easter might have been like? It shouldn't surprise you, it's abundantly clear. The Grinch hated other fine times of the year. Anniversaries and birthdays drove him into hiding, and never on New Year's could he muster glad tidings. But the day that perplexed him and gave him the shivers was the Sunday 6 weeks after the full moon connected to groundhogs, but before Valentine. It doesn't matter. Yes, Easter was the day the old Grinch's heart was a tatter, as he stood high over Whoville contemplating the matter. It's true that the Whos weren't as dull as he thought, for they had welcomed him in, not one but the lot, on last Christmas Day after he'd stolen their gifts. They'd fed him and honored his place in their midst. But that was then, and this was now, and that didn't fit with that then this how. He could see their grace in letting him feast on the day that they gather and carve up roast beast. But this Easter they mark with a zealous delight, he thought as he hid in his cave out of sight. They tell of a man, not all of this earth, a story more important than the one of his birth. A story of sorrow and sadness and pain, but each year the Whos would come back again to sing about life and of love and of power, and they'd gather in churches for over an hour. It was a ridiculous rite, this ecclesiastic trip, and if he chose, to their homes once more he could strip, make off with their baskets and chocolate and ham. But been there, done that. The Grinch needed a new plan. So on this Easter morn, like none ever before, the Grinch headed for church, not knowing what was in store. He dressed in green shoes, pink socks, yellow jacket. But when he walked in, no Whos made a racket. They simply welcomed their Yule friend from the hill, took his red parka, which some remembered still. One shook his hand, another said, "How do?" Then the Who usher led the Grinch to his pew. Before him was a book that he'd never seen. It had scribbles with lines and words in between. The windows were colored and textured and rich, but he didn't know which window was which. And then it began, first the organ, then the choir, then all the Whos were singing, but not him, the old liar. He'd forgotten how much these Whos loved to sing, and almost, yes, almost, gave up the whole thing. But the Grinch stomached through one hymn, then the next, and he sat it out, still wondering, confused and perplexed, till came the time the story was told and the mystery of it all began to unfold. It seems there was one who suffered and died, was abandoned and alone, though many had cried. But that wouldn't be the end of his way, for after 3 days a stone rolled away. And even after that he appeared to his friends. How could they believe that death was the end? The power of love brings us peace, makes us winners, and even forgives when we forget we are sinners. It's a remarkable story written terribly well. In a book called the Bible, the Whos would all tell. But that's just the start of the story, they say. He's alive in the poorest and the saddest to this day. Now, just like old Thomas, the Grinch started to doubt. It's too good to be true, proof offered without. Holes in his hands to touch and to see would make good sense before one might believe. Then over his shoulder, an old Who whispered clear, I remember you from the start of the year. We brought you to table and asked you to carve, and it wasn't because we thought you likely to starve. We knew that you'd taken our trees and our toys. We knew that you'd saddened our Who girls and boys. But we wanted you with us after your change of heart, because Easter reminds us we all deserve a new start. And the Grinch sat so still in that odd churchy pew, for he never thought enough about the grace of the Whos. They weren't simply kind, he was making the connection, for mercy in them came from another direction. Christmas, it's true, doesn't come from a store, but Easter's a mystery because there seems so much more. And the Grinch discovered, for those hurt, held, or in prison, nothing stops the chorus, hallelujah, he is risen. And for the first time ever, the Grinch stood to sing. And while he sounded awful, what joy he did bring to that congregation of Whos, first Whoville reformed, who witnessed the Grinch in amazement reborn. Let bells and chimes ring and church choirs sing. Let music resound with this miraculous thing. Through Whoville, Mount Crumpet, and to every nation. You don't have to be a Grinch to share in God's transformation. Happy Easter.